Lisa Bergman is next, but first, on May 30th, Pope Francis will lead the major shrines around the world in praying the Rosary for the Blessed Mother's protection amid the coronavirus pandemic. Francis will pray at the replica of the Lourdes Grotto in the Vatican Gardens on Pentecost Eve. Among those who will accompany the Pope will be a doctor, a nurse, a recovered COVID patient, as well as a person who lost a family member to the virus. Shrines around the world will connect to the event and take part in the prayer, including the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. The service will take place at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. On Wednesday, Pope Francis approved a miracle attributed to the intercession of Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus. This will pave the way for his beatification. According to a statement from the Knights, the miracle involved an unborn child in the U.S. who was healed in utero of a life-threatening condition in 2015. McGivney founded the Knights of Columbus in 1882 to provide spiritual aid to Catholic men and financial help for their widows and families. The first American parish priest to be beatified, McGivney will soon be declared blessed. A second miracle is required for McGivney's canonization. And on Tuesday, the Diocese of St. Cloud, Minnesota, reached an agreement to settle legal claims with survivors of clergy sexual abuse. The diocese said the agreement includes a $22.5 million trust to compensate abuse victims, along with plans for the diocese to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. In a news release, St. Cloud Bishop Donald Kettler apologized to survivors for the harm they suffered and said he will assist in the healing of all those who have been hurt. The diocese said it will disclose the names of all clergy who have been credibly accused of abuse. On Tuesday, an executive order was issued in Howard County, Maryland, effectively banning the distribution of Holy Communion, the most vital part of Catholic worship. The original order stated, quote, "There shall be no consumption of food or beverage of any kind before, during, or after religious services, including food or beverage that would typically be consumed as part of a religious service." After outcry by the Archdiocese of Baltimore and people of faith, Howard County on Thursday announced they were lifting the ban in light of Governor Larry Hogan's announcement that Maryland restaurants are being allowed to reopen. The Archdiocese of Baltimore hailed the decision and pledged to work with the state and county to ensure safety and the common good as churches resume services.
We need our churches and our synagogues and our mosques. We want them open. Churches, synagogues, mosques, and other. We want them open, and we want them open as soon as possible. And if I have to, I will override any governor that wants to play games. Now, there may be some areas, by the way, where the pastor or whoever may feel that it's not quite ready, and that's okay. That's okay, but let that be the choice of the congregation and the pastor.
President Trump earlier this week speaking about the essential nature of worship as the country begins to reopen. Joining us now to discuss the tension between the First Amendment right to religious expression and public health is Lisa Bergman. She's co-founder of the St. Charles Borromeo Society. Lisa, why do so many think, and particularly governors, they've been slow to open churches, even if the pastors and parishes are following social distancing and safety guidelines practiced by groceries and casinos? What's the reluctance here?
Honestly, I wish I knew, because that's the number one perception that we keep trying to fight, is this very strange perception that somehow churches are more dangerous than any of those, essential businesses that you've named. I can't think of a single reason why, and so I really don't know why that perception just continues to persist.
Now, you're working from a grassroots level, and you started an organization to push the Catholic hierarchy to speak out and restore the sacraments to the faithful. Give me a sense of where you believe we are today. I mean, we saw California, they're opening up. They even went beyond the governor's orders and said, no, we're going to go and, open up to this capacity. Then you have other places like your archdiocese in Chicago. You still don't have masses.
Right, yes. Well, I think as a country, we've come a long way just in the past month or so. May has seen a lot of openings around the country, but certainly there are some frustrating areas like Chicago Archdiocese, like you mentioned, where there seems to be reluctance even among those who you would think would be pushing for the opening of the churches. And, there's a limited amount that we can do to change that, but nevertheless, we do it because it's the right thing to do.
The mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, had this to say about the reopening of churches.
This is like turning a dimmer switch, not flipping a light switch. And these that we hope to bring online at some point in Phase 3 include summer programs and youth activities, especially those at our parks, religious services, gyms, and yes, the lakefront and beaches, all hopefully later in June.
Does that sound like a workable timetable for you?
Yeah, I don't understand why we don't have our churches open already. We have them open in many other states. And, when you look at what happened in Minnesota when the governors tried to keep them shut down and the Minnesota bishop said, no, this is important enough that we are not going to follow that order. It is not being applied evenly. It's not being applied fairly. And we're going to do what's right for our congregations. That's the sort of stance that we should expect to see from those who are supposed to be defending the faithful. They're supposed to be our shepherds. They're supposed to be there for us. And so, we've really applauded that courageous action by the Minnesota bishops, and we'd like to see that happen in other places.
Are you satisfied with the way the Archdiocese of Chicago is working with the state to reopen? They seem to be following Pritzker's lead on this, the Illinois governor. Cardinal Blaise Cupich, he's got this 3-point phase-in plan, and it's rather complicated. And bottom line is you still don't have masses there.
Right, and we don't even have a date set for when they will resume. And really, part of the problem is not just the phasing, but he's also requiring each parish to become certified in order to reopen. And this is a very confusing requirement because that's not been required in any other diocese up to now that I'm aware of. It's also not been required in any other essential business. And so you have to wonder why he chose to place that burden on himself when it wasn't asked for. And, in the hoops that have to be jumped through in order to get that certification, and the warning that spot checks will be performed randomly to ensure continued compliance, just isn't the language of the church. So we're really
not only is it not the language of the church, people keep talking about controlled studies. There's no controlled studies of temperature checks or mask wearing. All of this is voodoo science. I mean, they're throwing stuff at the wall, hoping that this will mitigate. But if you look at the trajectory of this virus seems to have had its peak. It's coming down. It's dying out. That's what happens with viruses. Happened with MERS. Happened with SARS. There's no vaccines to some of these things. They just die out. But I agree with you. There seems to be a predilection on the part of some bishops to close churches down early and then wait for the states to give them the high sign, or in some cases ignore the states altogether. I mean, in Nevada, there was initially a 10-person limit on religious services, but after backlash from the Justice Department, the governor changed that to a 50-person limit because that's what he was requiring of other businesses. Are those restrictions accessible, and should the Catholic Church be beholden to them?
I mean, I think we both can see that that's obviously a no. Why would we apply a different standard to the church than we're applying anywhere else? And when you look at the history of the Catholic Church, I mean, we basically invented hospitals. Our saints went out and saved people in the streets. Why on earth would you not trust us to have people's best interests in mind? That's crazy.
But before I let you go, and it's such an important topic because, I mean, look, my take is it's beholden and it's a duty of every pastor and every bishop to keep his people safe. We want to be safe. But you can be innovative and you can be creative about the way you keep people safe. Here in New Orleans, they've had outdoor masses for weeks in parking lots. And in some of the bigger churches, you can have 200, 300 people in there, and there's still social distancing. There are ways to do this. And with the enormous churches in Chicago and some of the huge parking lots in the suburbs, you could certainly do that with no risk to life or of spreading contagion. Tell me about the St. Charles Borromeo Society. You're sponsoring a National Day of Prayer on May 30th at 8 p.m. What's that about, and how can we find out more about your society?
So the St. Charles Borromeo Society was something that we put together in order to kind of create a place where everyone who's frustrated about this situation can come, and they can meet up with other people who are also frustrated and want to do something about it. So that we have a forum, you can go on there, you can find your state, your city, and you can post something saying, I want to meet up to pray, have a prayer rally, and other people can meet you there so that, you know, you're not alone. We also have all sorts of different resources that you can look at, canon law resources. We have the actual document that was created by the Thomistic Institute for the USCCB, which actually tried to balance the importance of keeping people safe along with the integrity of the sacraments so that neither one is risked. You can look at all of that. And so, you know, those are important things to know about. And then, like you mentioned, we are calling for a National Day of Prayer on the eve of Pentecost. That's this Saturday. And like you said, that's at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, and rolling on through the other time zones. We're asking people to get out there and sign a petition with your feet, because a petition with electronic signatures is too easy to ignore. And when you're out there standing in a big circle around your cathedral, that's pretty hard to ignore. And we really need to have a show of solidarity to show our bishops, our governments, and other Catholics, other Christians, just how important this really is, that it's perfectly safe and that we need access to the sacrament.
You can find out more about the St. Charles Borromeo Society at openourchurches.org. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.